Have you ever really thought about what happens when a nation just fractures? I mean, splits right down the middle, pushed to the absolute limit by internal conflict. Well, today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that scenario. We're looking at one of the most, well, defining periods in U.S. history, the American Civil War. Our plan is to unpack the core reasons behind it, the major turning points, and what it all left behind its legacy. We'll use the sources you provided as our guide. So yeah, the American Civil War fought between 1861 and 1865,
Yeah.
a fight really within the nation itself.
Yeah, and what jumps out immediately from the sources is just how clear the battle lines were drawn. You had the North, the Union, and the South, the Confederate States, and the absolute core issue, the thing simmering under everything, was slavery. That was the fundamental disagreement.
Okay, so let's really dig into that. What were the deep-seated things pushing these two sides into such a brutal war? We hear slavery, but what did that actually mean on the ground?
Well, you really can't overstate the role of slavery. The South's whole way of life, its economy, was just deeply, deeply dependent on the labor of enslaved African people. Think huge plantations, cotton, tobacco, those big cash crops. This created a totally different economic reality compared to the North. The North was industrializing fast, factories, machines, a different view on labor altogether, and their opposition to slavery was growing, partly moral, partly economic.
Right. And then came the political flashpoint. Abraham Lincoln getting elected in 1860, the sources make it clear Lincoln was against slavery expanding. And his win, that felt like an existential threat to the southern states, didn't it? Prompted 11 of them to just, well, leave the Union, secede.
Exactly. They framed it often as states' rights, the right to govern themselves, but I mean, it was inextricably tied to preserving slavery. And then the shooting starts, the attack on Fort Sumter, April 12th, 1861. That's the official kickoff.
That attack really lit the fuse, didn't it? Kicked off 4 incredibly bloody years.
Oh, absolutely. And as the war ground on, you had these key battles that really shaped things. Antietam, for instance, in 62. Just horrific, the single deadliest day in American history. And though it wasn't a clear win either way, tactically, it gave Lincoln the opening he felt he needed.
Ah, right. Which brings us to Lincoln's really central role, especially with the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. How did that declaration, freeing enslaved people in the Confederate States, how did that actually change the war itself? It wasn't just symbolic, was it?
Not at all. It was a massive moral statement, obviously, but
Right.
strategically, huge implications. Suddenly, the Union wasn't just fighting to stay together, it was fighting for freedom. That changed everything. It became a moral crusade. It helped keep European powers from backing the South. And crucially, it allowed black men to officially enlist in the Union Army. That was vital new soldiers, huge moral weight.
Okay, so that's a major shift. And you mentioned other key battles.
Yeah, Gettysburg, July 63, that's often called the Confederacy's high water mark. After that, they couldn't really launch major invasions north anymore. And around the same time, the Union won at Vicksburg. That gave them control of the Mississippi River, basically splitting the Confederacy into big strategic blows.
So the tide really turned around 63. How did it finally wrap up?
Well, it ground on, but eventually, in April 1865, the Confederate general Robert E. Lee surrendered to the Union general Ulysses S. Grant, Appomattox Courthouse. That marked the Union's victory and, crucially, the end of slavery in the United States.
But the cost, I mean, the sources mention over 600,000 American deaths. That's just staggering.
Yeah.
More than any other U.S. war, right, for an internal conflict?
It's a devastating number. But out of that immense sacrifice came, well, a fundamentally changed nation. First, the U.S. stayed united. The idea that a state could just leave, that was settled permanently. Second, slavery was abolished. Gone. Forever changing the South's society and economy. And third, it kicked off the Reconstruction era, a really complex period, trying to rebuild the South, integrate formerly enslaved people. That led to new laws, like the 14th and 15th Amendments think equal protection, black male suffrage. These really reshaped the country.
So tying this all together for you listening, we've seen how the Civil War grew from these deep cracks over slavery and economics. We've touched on the brutal fighting, those key turning points like Gettysburg and Vicksburg, and Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation changing the game. And the result, a preserved Union, yes, but also the abolition of slavery, a truly transformative outcome.
Yeah, and thinking about that legacy, maybe the question to leave you with is this. How do the echoes of that conflict issues around civil rights, equality, justice,